to you.
In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Good morning. Christ is in our midst. This morning, as you come to church, you may notice that things are a little bit different than last week when we left liturgy. A lot of things have happened this week. As you can see, some really incredible things are happening in our church, and we can begin to see them taking shape today. It's incredible to look at the walls and see what God has blessed us to do, putting up these beautiful icons. And I know some people had the comment, I didn't know exactly what we were doing until we saw it up on the wall. And once it's there on the wall, it's marvelous. It's incredible to see what's happening. So for the next few weeks, it will be being worked on. You may think that it's almost done because there's so much already there, but realize this is a year's worth of painting that's been affixed to the walls. And now the next few weeks, the background will be put in, and the lettering, and the inscriptions, and many other things. So what an incredible thing it is. And with this work going on, we, as you see, all the altar is full of scaffolding. So you can't really move around in the altar space. So we moved everything that's in the altar and brought it out here out of a practical need. But what is a practical need can also be an educational moment as well. And so as I mentioned to you, I would like to take this time today and the next few weeks as we have the altar out in the middle to speak about and explain what it is that we do every Sunday and every liturgy and what is happening and what we're seeing or what we're not seeing that's usually behind the icon screen. And now you can see, you notice there's fewer altar boys today. It's a coincidence. They can't hide behind the altar screen today. I understand. So I wanted to start. There's so many things, obviously, to talk about and reflect on and to think about, because Orthodox Christian worship is anything but monochromatic. It's anything but one-dimensional. There's many things that are happening. There's many physical things that we have in our churches that remind us of who we are as Christians and what we are doing in worshiping our God. Because we're not simply here to offer prayer to God. Prayer is a good thing. You can do that any time of the day. At home, when you're walking with friends, you can pray anytime. The reason we have a church is so that we can gather as the body of Christ to worship our God. To worship our God. And what is worship? Have you thought about that before? We say it often. What is worship? I would simply say that worship is the offering of our lives to Christ, our God. Worship implies a sacrifice. There's always a sacrifice. If you look at the Old Testament, there's sacrifices of sheep and goats and lots of things, right? Here, the worship is the same. We are sacrificing. And what are we sacrificing? Ourselves, for one thing. We're offering ourselves as living victims to Christ, our God. We are giving Him our voice and our heart, which, if you think about it, there's not much we can give to God. He is the one, He has everything. He's the one that created us. So what can we give Him? Simply ourselves. Our hearts, our voice, our thought. And that's why we're here in worship, to dedicate ourselves and offer ourselves to Christ our God. So when you come to church every Sunday, this is what the church offers us to be in our hearts, is to come before the face of the living God and to bow down in worship, offering simply our hearts and our voices and our deeds, because the other part of worship is that none of us offer a perfect sacrifice to God. When we come to church, Our heart is not perfect. Our voices are not perfect. Some people's voices are more perfect, and we put them in the choir. We are not a perfect offering to God. The deeds of our life are incomplete. They're lacking. They are faulty. When we come to worship, though, we offer God simply who we are and what we are, and the meager things that we have done, the meager efforts that we have tried to love God and our neighbor, and we fall down before Him offering the very humble gift of our humble life, our broken heart, and a contrite spirit, which is the best sacrifice that any person can offer to God. A broken and humbled heart, God will not despise. So this is our attitude when we come to church. And I say that as a preface because it's important to realize why we're here and what we're doing. We are here to sanctify our lives, to offer the small things that we are, the small deeds, our small heart, to offer them to God and ask for Him to bless our lives, our heart, our deeds, and accept our simple sacrifice of praise. And we know in His mercy He does. And He returns to us things beyond our imagination, beyond our comprehension. He offers to us His very body and blood. So I say that as a way of preface to explain what we're doing here in church, and this important part to start of who we are and why we're here in church. So as I said, one of the things that we do is we offer ourselves. We offer ourselves, we create a building where we can come and worship, and we have here a beautiful building, an incredible building that's becoming even more beautiful from our humble efforts. And this building is then the space where we come to meet God here in this church of St. Peter and Paul at 5640 J Road is where we come and we invite our friends to come and meet and encounter the living God. If that's why you're here, you're in the right place. So everything you see around you then, including the altar, is something that is meant to lead us into the experience of God. In the liturgy, it's famously said that the liturgy is the place and the time where heaven and earth meet and come together. We come broken and humbled, and God comes down and transforms us and lifts us up and accepts us. So this space is where we come to meet heaven and earth come together into one place here. So that being said, you will notice, and you can review some of this in our wonderful guide that we have in the back that we just are publishing, called the Where Am I guide, which is a great question. Where are we? And you'll notice in there that there's 3 parts to the church. There's the back part called the narthex, where you came in to light a candle. And this is kind of like, I think of the narthex as the decompression chamber of a spaceship, where you go from one pressure to another, from one place to another, one reality to another. You leave the world and you begin to acclimate to the heavenly kingdom. And as you are in the narthex, you're becoming accustomed to a different world. You're entering, you're seeing the icons for the first time, you're seeing the vigil lamps, you're lighting your own candle as a symbol of your presence in God's house. And then coming from the narthex, you come to where you are now, which is the nave. We call it the nave, as you'll see in the handout. It's called the nave. Does anyone know why nave, or the significance of the word nave? Yes, indeed. Exactly. Nave or naval, navy are all related words. We're in a ship. A ship is a place like Noah's Ark of safety from a troubled world. And that's where we've come, to the nave, to the harbor of salvation, we would call it as well. So this is where we are in the nave, where all the people stand. In a way, it represents this world, this life, a sanctified life, a heavenly place, but still in this world. The altar is the third place of the church building, the narthex, the nave, the boat of salvation, and then the altar. If you think of the boat, it has to head in a certain direction, and you all are heading in a direction. What is that direction? Heaven, right? When you're in the church, when you're in the ark of salvation, Christ is the navigator directing us to the heavenly kingdom. So we all face the heavenly kingdom, including the priest faces the heavens, the heavenly kingdom. So the beautiful thing we have is this iconostas, or this icon wall, that depicts the icons on it. And behind it is our space that represents heaven. And if you think about it, heaven is a place of mystery, a place that has not been fully revealed yet. Christ has opened heaven, and for that reason we have openings to the doors, and yet the wall is still there until we die and meet Christ. So if you will, the iconostas that we have represents death that prevents us from fully experiencing Christ. That's the way to think of it. Okay, so talking about church architecture, and heaven is the place where we're all heading, and the place from which our God pours out his grace upon us. We come here, as I said, broken and humbled, right? And we face heaven, and we pray to God, and what happens? In the heavenly places, from the heavenly places, God comes out to meet us. And specifically, you see, when the chalice is brought out with the body and blood of Christ, it's coming from the heavens and coming down to us. Heaven and earth are united in that moment. The body and blood of Christ, which is sanctified and received in the heavens, is brought out to all the people here. Okay, so let me pause here. Does anyone have any questions or any thoughts so far with this in this educational part before we move on? Any questions or things you've wondered about the church space? If not, that's okay. If you're shy. Okay, so now, as I mentioned, when the altar articles and things are brought out into the church here, we have a chance to see what's happening. And you notice we set up a temporary, if you will, icon wall. It's much more permeable than the one that we have here, so you can see much better. But we still have the same form that we usually have, with Christ on one side and the Mother of God on the other side. And there's a significance to everything we do. The Mother of God on one side is really an icon of the incarnation of Christ. God incarnate, God being held in the arms of his mother. And on the other side, you have Christ by himself, which reminds us of him coming as the judge at the end of time. So if you will, we live and experience God in this space in between the incarnation and the second coming of Christ. This is where we are now. So that's a small thing in case you wondered about that. You also see St. John the Baptist on one side, the forerunner, who's always placed on that side, and the local saints of our church, Peter and Paul, on that side as well. Okay, so now I want to talk more about the altar itself, because here it is in the middle of all of us, and we can see what is happening. So let's go back a few thousand years, if you will, to the Old Testament. Because the Orthodox view of the Scriptures, Old and New Testament, is that they are connected, that they are continuous. There is not a break. It is not a separate God in the Old Testament and another God in the New Testament. This is one revelation of God, one economy, one work of salvation for all of us, the Old Testament and the New Testament. So in the Old Testament, God reveals to his people how they should worship him. And they have the tent of meeting, which they move from place to place. And in the tent, and eventually then later becomes the temple in Jerusalem, there's the place where the people stand, and just like we have here, there is the place that represents heaven. The big difference is that in the Old Testament, only the high priest could enter the Holy of Holies, and only once a year, and it was completely closed off. With the New Testament and the breaking down of the wall through Christ of heaven and earth, now we can enter and experience, and the priest comes out to the people, and the wall is no longer solid. Okay, I could ramble about lots of these different things for a long time, but what I want to get to is that in the Old Testament, when God reveals to his people how to worship him, what he is revealing, and there's very specific things that he tells them to do, very specific things he wants them to have in the altar. And we keep that to this day because the Old and New Testament are connected. God in the Old Testament is revealing how the people should worship him. He's also revealing, though, a place where they can model heaven, where they can encounter heaven, where the Spirit of God can descend on a physical place and lift the people up into heaven. And so what God told the people to do was not just arbitrary, but a reflection of heaven. So the things we have here reflect the things in heaven, remind us of heaven, prepare us for heaven, even, if you will. These are the same. We have physical things. We have certain things we'll see here, but they point and they model heaven itself. So what we have on the altar and what we see in the altar is actually very similar to the Old Testament with a few nuances because of the coming of Christ, and you'll see. So for instance, if you read the Old Testament, there is an altar of sacrifice where sacrifices are made daily for the sins of the people. Animals are brought and sacrificed to God. In the same way, in the altar, modeling the heavens, and in the prayers of the church, you see that the altar table of here and the altar of heaven are united. What we do here is ratified, if you will, in heaven. You'll hear that in the prayers if you listen closely. The deacon will say that our God who loves mankind, having accepted these offerings that we bring upon his heavenly altar, will send down upon us the grace of the Holy Spirit. So it's not simply a table, it's a representation, a connection between heaven and earth that we see here. So that's the altar table. No longer do we offer bulls and goats and things like that. We offer the one who offered himself once and for all for the sins of the people, Christ our God. There's a word there that's worth mentioning. Because obviously Jesus died and rose from the dead 2,000 years ago. So we're not somehow going back and doing those exact things again. What we're doing is this word in Greek called anamnesis, which the Lord tells us when he says, do this, and he's talking about the bread and the wine of the Last Supper. He says, keep doing this in anamnesis, or remembrance is sometimes how it's translated. The word, though, anamnesis, is not so much remembering something in the past, remembering the death and resurrection of Christ, but is bringing the past and the present together because of our God who is outside of time and space. We are bringing to the present place, in the present moment, the sacred events, and witnessing, even, if you will, be so bold, witnessing the events of the death and resurrection of Christ every time we celebrate the liturgy. And this then is the altar of sacrifice on which the Lord is offered, as we'll see. And so for that reason, you'll see one of the things on the altar is this cloth. And Deacon, if you want to, do you want to take one side here so we can hold it up? So this cloth is called the antimension. It's a cloth that you have to have it to serve a liturgy. If you do not have this cloth, you cannot serve liturgy. And if you do serve liturgy, you're in big trouble. Let me pause for a second. There's some spaces on the sides if people want to make themselves comfortable. There's some seats on the side over here. Please make yourself welcome. So this cloth is given by the bishop, and at the very bottom you can see, maybe we can hold it up for everyone to see. At the very bottom, in the middle, it says, of Denver, Isaiah. So Metropolitan Isaiah, our bishop, has signed this cloth. And by giving us this signed cloth, given us the permission and the blessing to serve liturgy. If we do not have this cloth, we wouldn't be here. We wouldn't be serving liturgy. If we go somewhere, let's say there's a church camping trip or some kind of retreat, and we want to serve liturgy, what do you think we do? We bring this cloth. And what do you see is on the cloth? All of the events that we are experiencing in the liturgy. You see the cross here. Maybe we can turn it. You see the cross here. You see the Lord, having died on the cross, being prepared for burial and laid in the tomb. And then you see the empty tomb. So you see the death, burial, and resurrection of Christ displayed there to point to the fact that the sacrifice we are offering is a bringing to the present of the sacrifice of Christ that was offered once and for all for the sins of the people. So this is a very important part of the altar. Let's put it back here. And this, if you will, points to no longer is there bulls and goats being offered, it's Christ. And so we have to have this as a reminder of that reality. And in just a minute, after the sermon, we will open it and present on it our sacrifice, which again is very humble and simple. It's our voice of praise to God and the bread and wine that's been prepared as well. Okay, let me go through quickly, because there's a lot, and I could spend a long time with all these things. As I mentioned, a lot of Old Testament connections are fulfilled in what we see in the altar. For example, in the Holy of Holies was the Ark of the Covenant, right? That contained God, right? That contained the things of God. That's basically what this is, the Ark of the Covenant. And you see that behind the Ark of the Covenant in the Old Testament, they had affixed cherubim to represent, again, the heavenly orders that sit and guard the throne of God. That is what they had in the Old Testament, and that is what we have to this day, modeling the heavenly kingdom, the altar, the throne of God, and the cherubim around. The candlesticks, you'll see, as in the Old Testament, that's an important part of the altar. There was also, in the Ark of the Covenant, have you ever seen Raiders of the Lost Ark before? It's one of my favorite movies. It's all, it's all about finding this mythical thing of the Ark of the Covenant. I would say we don't need to find it. We have it right here. For instance, in the Ark of the Covenant, there was a jar that contained a little bit of the manna, which was a prefiguring of the body of Christ. Because he said, I am the bread that came down from heaven. Your fathers ate the manna and died. I am the living bread. And so for that reason, we don't have a jar of manna. We have the tabernacle right here, which inside is held some of the reserved sacraments of the body and blood of Christ, the new manna, the fulfillment of the manna. So there you go. This is part of the altar that's very important. When someone is sick in the community, I will take some of the body and blood of Christ that's stored in the tabernacle and go to the hospital or go to your home and bring it to you. And that is the manna, and it's stored there on the altar. In front of it, we have another candle because of you put candles around holy things, so we put a candle in front of that. Three more things to mention here. In the Ark of the Covenant, there was the rod of Aaron that budded. This was a sign that Aaron should be the high priest. On the altar table, we have the cross, which may seem like death and dead wood, like that rod was, but brings life and bud. And we even have the budded cross, if you will, right? The cross brings life to us, just like that rod sprouted into life, giving hope and pointing to the priest, Aaron. This cross points to Christ, the high priest, and brings life to all of us. So that's one thing that we have on the altar table. One of the most famous things in the Ark of the Covenant, though, out of all of them, I would say, what haven't we mentioned yet? The Ten Commandments, the tablets of stone. And what do we have instead of the Ten Commandments? We have the fulfillment of the law and the prophets, Christ. And so here it is. the book of the Gospels that fulfill the law and the prophets. So this is our 10 Commandments, if you will, that we have on the altar table. You'll also see a couple service books, because we don't have the services memorized. And you'll also see today, since communion is being offered, you'll see our tablecloth, our napkin, if you will, and the spoon. When you see this on the altar, it means that we're having the liturgy and preparing for the liturgy. Okay. So that's a few things. Couple other little things. The censer is an important part, again from the Old Testament, offering incense to God, symbolizing the rising of our prayer, and the sweet smell of the fragrance of our prayer is in the altar. And we offer this to God, incense, just as they did as well. Going through quickly here, one of the things, I actually learned this recently, because there's so much to learn in the church, but there's something really interesting about the censer in the incense that we offer. So obviously the censer, this one's a little faded, but it's gold. A gold censer, it's a little faded. Gold, and inside what do we put? We put incense, right? And incense is made of frankincense along with fragrant oils called myrrh. So if you will, when we're incensing, we're offering to God gold, frankincense, and myrrh, which is the gifts of the wise men. In addition to that, you'll notice that there are 12 bells on the censer. The 12 bells, what number 12 does it remind you of? You look up. The 12 apostles, about whom it is said, their sound has gone forth into all the earth, and their words to the ends of the world. So we're reminded of the apostles and the gift to the Lord, the offering of incense. So that's the incenser. And you see, all these things are usually hidden behind there, but now you can see. And the last thing to point out here in the altar space is this chair, which we usually have in the very back of the altar. This is, in a way, the throne of God, and it's used in the service very infrequently for a limited time when a ruling hierarch is here. He'll sit on the throne, completing the altar space, completing the full picture of God sitting on the throne, and the priests and deacons would sit around from ancient times. So that's the throne of the bishop. Don't go sitting there. That's why he actually gets two thrones, but that's a whole other history of why there's two thrones for another time. Do we have a few minutes more, or do you think we should pause and go to the next? Wait to the next one? A few minutes? Okay, because I wanted to show you, I shouldn't ask that question, sorry. I wanted to show you one more thing in the altar space, and that is this table here. This table is usually what you see when you open this door of the angel Michael there. You can see a little cubby in the wall back there. Can everyone see okay? I'll stand over here. So usually we have a little table in the altar. You don't really see it very much. But because we're not in the altar right now, we set up this table for the practical reasons that you'll see. This is called the prothesis table, or the proskymedia table. It's the offering table, or preparation table, really. It's the table where we prepare our offering and our sacrifice to God that will be offered on the altar table. And right after the sermon, you will see these things that are on the altar, on the proskymedia, or table of preparation, be brought to the altar table itself to be offered to God. Okay, so what is on here? Well, one thing that I'd like to point out is this icon to start with. This icon, do you notice what is the icon of? Pop quiz. It's an easy one. Nativity. Okay. So the birth of Christ. Now remember a second ago I said the altar has an icon of the death and resurrection, the offering of Christ. So you have, if you will, the beginning of Christ's life happens here, and the final days and glorification of Christ happens on the other table, the altar table. And we will move in the liturgy from his birth to his offering. And we'll talk more in the future weeks about the structure of liturgy and how it is. For today, I really wanted to show you the specific things that you're seeing. So on this table of preparation, you'll see here, I'll lift up this, a cloth covering. Underneath is the chalice and what's called the discos. I have other ones prepared here to actually show you, since this is used for the service today. You'll notice that it's covered. The offering of bread and wine that we have under the cover, it's covered. Just like at the beginning of Christ's life, it was secret, if you will. He was born in a cave, laid in a manger. Only a few people knew about it. He had not yet begun his public ministry and his road to the cross and resurrection. So for that reason, it's covered. There's also always like a practical reason with everything you see, because you don't want flies or dust to fall in. So there's always practical and theological reasons together. But the theological one is he's in the cave, if you will, right? And you'll see that this is where it starts. Now, on the left side here is, I made a model one here so I can show everyone. Is this, it's called the discos, or plate, on which the priest cuts in a very specific way and prepares the bread to be offered in the liturgy. Now, the bread is baked by members of our community who bring the bread Saturday or Sunday, and we take the fresh bread, which has leaven in it, signifying the risen Christ, and we cut it in a specific way. You all see how it's not just a loaf of bread or just a piece of bread. There's a few things going on here in the bread. You can see a little bit. Can you all see okay? Lower down for those over here. Yeah, sure. So what you see here is our offering. And of course this developed over time in the liturgy. At the very beginning it would simply be a loaf of bread that would be broken and eaten. Meaning and symbolism and things that point to Christ were added for our benefit and education in here. So now we have, if you look at the middle, as the deacon brings it around, at the very middle of the plate is the main piece of bread that's cut from the center of the loaf. It's called the Lamb, because Christ is the Lamb of God who takes away the sin of the world. So that piece represents Christ, that cube piece in the middle. On one side of that, can I show people here? Do you want to hold it? Actually, before we talk about the other one, so the lamb is in the middle of the plate. This is representing Christ, so it's fitting he's right in the middle. And around him, as you'll see, are the saints and angels and all of us being offered to God. So the lamb is cut, and as it's cut on each side, the words of the prophet Isaiah are read by the priest. You'll see in the worship of the church, most of the things we say are either from the Psalms, Old Testament prophecies, a lot of things like that, and the early prayers of St. John Chrysostom. So we read the words of the prophet Isaiah as we cut the lamb. He was led as a sheep to the slaughter. We cut one side. As a blameless lamb before his shearer is dumb, he opened not his mouth. In his humiliation, his judgment was taken away. And who shall declare his generation? And then finally, for his life is raised up from the earth. We cut the bottom and we raise it up from the earth. Just like Christ was raised, the piece of bread is raised from the loaf. He is raised up from the earth onto the cross. And then we turn the lamb over. You probably didn't know some of these things. You just see things going by. So that's why I wanted to highlight this. So after that, we're reading the prophecy of Isaiah. We say, sacrificed is the Lamb of God who takes away the sin of the world, the life and salvation of the world. And we cut the bread just as Christ was offered in sacrifice. And then we make a cross form. So you can see there's actually 4 pieces that are barely being held together. Later in the liturgy, the priest will actually, after the consecration, raise this bread and say, the holy things are for the holy, And at that point, he will break the bread, just as it was done, as we heard in the gospel, when the Lord saw the disciples. They broke the bread, and the Lord was known in the breaking of the bread. So the bread is broken just as the body of God was broken. Not a bone of him was broken, but he was sacrificed on the cross. And these are the pieces that will be offered in the chalice and distributed to all the faithful. So that's the centerpiece of Christ. I'll put it back. We can see. So that middle piece represents Christ. And as you see, that's the most important piece. That's the one that becomes what we eat in the chalice, the body of God, right? This is what we will be processing in just a minute. In our covered gifts, we will bring them around the church. We will unveil them and then offer the sacrifice and distribute to the people. Okay. So also on this plate, you'll notice on this side is a triangular piece that actually it represents the Mother of God. And it has her initials written into the bread. And as the priest takes this piece, he puts it on the plate, and he says, in honor and memory of our blessed and glorious Lady, the Theotokos, at your right hand, from the Psalms, at your right hand stood the Queen, arrayed in a vesture of inwoven gold, adorned in varied colors. So on the Lord's right is the Mother of God there. As we continue to build the offering here, you'll notice on this side, there's 9 small pieces of bread. There's 3 of them right there. There's 9 small pieces, each representing one of the different orders of the people that are in heaven, starting with the angels. Michael and Gabriel and all the angels is the first. John, the prophet and forerunner, and all the prophets are the next one. The next order is the apostles, Peter and Paul, and all the apostles. Then we move on to the martyrs, the ascetics, the women ascetics, the mercenaries, and John Chrysostom, whose liturgy we are celebrating, or Basil the Great, if it's his liturgy. So this is all the saints in heaven, if you will, on this side. All the saints and angels in heaven representing that. There's another triangular piece at the bottom. That's the next one that's taken out. And this is given in remembrance and commemoration of our bishop, Isaiah. So he gets a big piece right there in the middle. And then on either side, this side and this side, you'll see some crumbs. If you notice in the back of the church, there are some prayer lists where you can write down names of loved ones. Well, those lists are gathered, and when we're offering and preparing for the liturgy, we take out a piece of bread for every name that you write down. So this is all of us, all the living on one side and all of the departed on one side. Because in the resurrection, dead and living, angels, saints, and Christ are all together. So these are the things that are on. Do you want to put it back over there? Thank you. It's so nice to have a deacon today. We're gonna steal you if you're not careful. So this is all the things that are offered and that we bring to the table. We're offering to God himself. He is the one that is offered, the one that receives, the one that is offered. We offer to God this bread and the wine as well. And you see the deacon is covering it as is covered under there. Not only is it covered with a large cloth, but it's also covered with a small cloth for the discos and another small cloth for the chalice. And underneath there, again, practical and theological, there's this piece of metal here. The practical side, obviously, is so that the cloth isn't just sitting on the bread. It creates a little canopy to protect the bread from anything. And the theological, if you will, is seen when the priest puts it on. He says a prayer, and he says, the heavens were established by the word of the Lord. And then he says, the star, and that's what this is actually called, the star, came and stood where the young child was, with Mary his mother. So again, the nativity is represented here. Christ is there hidden, but the star is over him, just as it is in the icon as well. So in just a few minutes, and that's why I wanted to show you this, because in just a few minutes, we will, during the great entrance, process with the chalice and the discos, with the bread and the wine, around the church and bring it to the altar of sacrifice there. One small thing to note, I didn't cover yet. Connected, the discos is one side, right? And the chalice is the other. One small thing there. As you know, it's wine that we have, bread and wine. But it's actually, at this point in the chalice, not just wine. Because when we're preparing the Lamb of God, there's one other thing I forgot to mention. After we cut the bottom in a cruciform way, we then take the liturgical spear, which is right here, and we pierce the lamb, just like Christ was pierced with a spear. And the deacon or the priest at that point says, and one of the soldiers with a spear pierced his side, and they pierced the side of the lamb representing Christ, and forthwith there came out blood and water. And so the deacon will take the cruets, the containers of wine and water, and mingle them together, mix them together, just like blood and water flowed from the side of Christ. So it's not just wine, it's wine and water that are mixed together into the chalice and then offered on the table. I think I've exceeded my sermon time, so I'll take a break there, but I hope it was interesting to begin to see at least what is in the altar and what you're seeing physically now that it's here. So I encourage you to watch closely what's happening. And as we go the next couple of weeks, we'll be walking through what's happening in the liturgy. We'll look at the prayers that the priest is saying, the hymns that the choir is saying, which have deep meaning and incredible teaching of what the church is. Everything that we believe about God is represented here in the liturgy. Every time we come, we're reliving and experiencing God. So thank you all for your attention and your patience as we talk through this. It's a joy to share it with all of you. Let's rise now and we'll continue with the Divine Liturgy.